Hey everyone, in today's video I want to talk about my old neighborhood, the place where I used to stay for more than 3 decades before I moved to my current location. So this is the Bukit Gombak neighborhood, which is a very typical public housing estate here in Singapore. So many of these buildings that you see here are actually public flats, high-rise public housing. And I want to maybe touch up this sketch slightly to add more details. So some of the flats are new, some are actually more than 20 years old. If I remember correctly, this estate was built in 1985. That is 4 years after I was born. So my parents actually moved into this area 4 years or a few years after I was born. The train station was built in 1990, which is many years after the estate was built. And I remember taking the train at this train station to go to my secondary school, to go to university, and also to go to sketch walks for many years. So this is a very memorable place for me. Bukit Gombak, the name Bukit Gombak comes from the Malay word Bukit, which means hill, and Gombak, which means a collection of something. So in this neighborhood, there is actually a hill here on this side, and let me turn on the text that I have already written. So there is a hill here, which means only the area here can be used to build flats. So this area is actually, this neighborhood is actually not very crowded due to the fact that this hilly area cannot be used to build flats. So only public housing or private condominiums, they were built here, just in front of this hilly area. And it makes this neighborhood really quiet, very idyllic. I'm not sure if that's the correct word to describe it. Anyway, it's not noisy at all. There are not a lot of people on the streets, even though there are a lot of public housing here, but after people go to work in the city area, this neighborhood, it's really quiet. So this was where I stayed, in this block here. And my bedroom is actually on the other side. So my bedroom is actually facing this block here. And I really like that place because even though there are traffic on the road, I was still able to record my YouTube videos because my room wasn't facing the road. So I wasn't able to hear any traffic noise when I closed the door. And many of you who actually followed my YouTube channel for years, or many of you who are my early subscribers, you will know that when I record videos, there are very often sounds of birds chirping in the background. The birds actually stay on the trees between these two blocks. So there are actually trees between these two blocks here of flats. And you may notice there is a lot of greenery. So in Singapore, we try to build our neighborhoods with greenery in mind. So we have trees that are lined up beside the roads. So you can see all the trees here. This area here, these are the roads. So we have a lot of trees lined up beside the roads. They provide shade, and not just that, they also sort of block out the traffic noise. So that's where I stayed. There is a bus stop here. I took the bus to my secondary school. So occasionally I would take the train. The train station is here, or sometimes I would just take the bus, especially if I have a lot of things to carry. So I have two options to go to school, my secondary school. Let's see, oh, this is my primary school, which is about Sorry, let me just zoom in slightly. My primary school is about 5 minutes walk away. It's an old school, but it has been recently rebuilt, so now it's like a series of buildings. The old school was really small, but now it's like, wow, it's huge with a lot of buildings, many rooms for students. And beside the school there is a canal. Probably am not able to see that, so let me just zoom in. So this is the school. Beside the school and the public housing here, there is this canal here, and there is a pathway where I used to practice my electric skateboard. So I would just practice around this area here beside the big canal or the drain. In Singapore, public housing is a mix of shorter flats and taller flats. So you see all these flats with the orange roof. These are actually orange tiled roofs. Yeah, I remember watching the rain go off the roofs when there is a thunderstorm, especially when there is like a very heavy rain. I would stand here in front of in my living room looking down and see how the rain rolls off the roofs. So in Singapore we have a mix of shorter public housing and taller public housing, and the way the neighborhood is designed is the shorter public housing or the shorter public flats, they will be placed near the roads. So you see this flat here, it's placed near the road, and this flat here is placed near the road. And we have flats here which are placed near the road. The idea is for drivers who are driving along the road, when they look up at the flats, they would see the shorter flats first before they see the taller flats which are behind. So when you are driving, it looks like it makes the neighborhood feel less claustrophobic, because if you only have tall buildings like this, for example, this condominium was built several years later. So when you're driving along this road, you look towards the condominium, you will see this very tall 20-over-story condominium, and it feels claustrophobic. You won't be able to see the sky when you're driving through this area. But when you are driving through this area, you can see the shorter flats, you can actually see the sky. So it makes the neighborhood feel more spacious that way. However, nowadays, due to land shortage here in Singapore, all the flats, they are becoming taller and taller. The strategy or the planning to build shorter flats beside the roads, that plan, I believe it has been scrapped. So many of the newer neighborhoods are just filled with tall public housing, just like what you see in Hong Kong. What I like about public housing is the void decks, which is this empty area beneath the public flats. So void decks, they are actually just pillars that raise the building off the street. So for example, for this public flat that I'm drawing here, I can actually walk beneath this flat, through the flat, and go through here as well, which is really cool. But nowadays, the new buildings, the new public flats, they have void decks that are almost maze-like, so you can't just walk through the buildings, beneath the buildings anymore. It's easier for you to actually walk outside of the building to get to where you are. You can't just walk through. For example, if I want to go to, I stayed here. If I want to go to my primary school, I can just walk through these 4 blocks of flat to the primary school. For newer housing estates, I'll probably have to walk outside of the estate along the main road to the school. This sketch was drawn with this app called Concepts on my Samsung Tab S8 Ultra. So I have added some notes pointing to the different locations. Oh, remember the hill that I talked about? So this hilly area cannot be used to build flats, and not just that, the Ministry of Defense is actually somewhere inside this or on top of the hilly area, which means there are height restrictions for many of the buildings here. So the buildings here cannot go beyond a certain height, and this also maintains the population level in this area, which also makes it less crowded. However, when it comes to traveling to the city, it's not that convenient because this MRT station is actually about maybe at least 45 minutes away from the city center, which is, I guess, in other countries would be considered quite nearby, but in Singapore it's considered far. So I used to jog around this area. This whole area here used to be another hilly area, but this area has since, the hilly area has since been cleared, like leveled down to build more flats. And I used to jog around this area here, this circumference, which is about 8 or 10 kilometers. So I used to jog around here, and there's a petrol station here where I used to buy some drinks to relax, to rest. And I will continue jogging around the circumference to this area here where people used to play their remote control planes. This area has been cleared as well to build flats, unfortunately. So this area here looks very much like Hong Kong. It's very claustrophobic, very crowded, and it's very boring because it's just a group of high-rise public housing and condominiums, compared to my own neighborhood, which is a mix of tall and shorter flats. We have a stadium there where I used to jog as well. There's a train station, which is good. There is also this quarry lake called Little Guilin. Sorry, this app is starting to lag because there are a lot of details here. So there is this quarry lake here, Little Guilin. Many people like to take photographs here, especially for their wedding, because this area here is very beautiful. This area is part of nature, and it looks, I mean, when you take photographs here, it makes you look like you are not in Singapore. So I guess that's the main attraction here. So I would go to the stadium occasionally for exercise as well. So this is where I stayed. This area here used to be just flat land, and this area used to be used for carnivals, fun fairs. They would set up the Ferris wheel, those train rides, and there would occasionally be a stage where people would perform. I remember going to one of the fun fairs when I was less than 10 years old. My parents aren't very rich, so we would just pay for the admission fee to go into the fun fair, and we would just walk around, look at people play games. And I remember there was one occasion where we visited the fun fair, and the place was so wet because it was after the rain, and they had to put those cardboard boxes and wooden planks to put on the floor just so that people can walk around. It was fun. It was quite memorable. I still remember it to this day. But a few years later, they built high-rise 20-over-story condominiums here. So this could be a fun project for you to take on as well. Just draw your neighborhood, write some notes about the memories that you have at the places that you used to visit, that you stayed at. And many years later, when you look back at a sketch like this, it's really going to bring back a lot of memories. So this sketch was drawn with the help of another app that I use for reference purposes. It's Google Earth. So this is the 3D representation of my neighborhood. This is a really fun app. You can just turn around. So that's the flat that I stayed at. You can see there are like a lot more details compared to what I have in my drawing. And let me show you the trees that are between these two blocks. So the trees are actually here, and the birds would stay around the trees here. You can just move around the neighborhood, just fly around. Depending on where you are, there may or may not be 3D models for the buildings. So for this area, there are 3D models. Oh, take a look at this. So remember earlier I said this used to be a hilly area and they cleared it to build flats. This is how big that area is. So this is the area that I drew. This is my neighborhood. And this is the area, the hilly area, where they cleared to build more flats. You may be able to see some here. Yep. See? These are all the high-rise flats that I talked about earlier, and they are just high-rise flats. There's no mix of taller and shorter buildings. It's just flats like this. The shorter buildings are actually car parks, public car parks. Yep. So you see all these plots of land here, here, and here, here, and here. They are currently all filled up with flats that look like this. Whereas when you take a look at older neighborhoods, you can see a good mix of taller and shorter buildings. For example, such as this area here, we have shorter buildings and taller buildings. We have a good mix, except for newer neighborhoods, which are just tall buildings, Hong Kong-like tall buildings. I miss my old neighborhood. This sketch probably took me 2 hours to draw because, well, as you can see, it's very detailed. Alright, so thanks for watching. See you guys in the next video.